Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, AI Governance. Now, governance, generally speaking, refers to the systems, process, and rules that an organization uses to make decisions, achieve its goals, and ensure accountability. If you've no rules governing AI in your organization today, then it's a free-for-all. AI is a powerful tool and needs to be governed, with rules establishing when and how it is to be used. Don't wait any longer, okay? Right. We have a large audience today. And many of you know us, but many of you don't. I know this is the first time for many. We have quite a large group today. So a quick word on us. calQrisk, the company. We're based in Ireland. We see ourselves as experienced risk and compliance professionals, like many of you today. I know from looking at the list, a lot of risk and compliance people. We offer a GRC solution, governance, risk and compliance. That's a SaaS software solution. We have many customers in the financial services sector, in particular, in public sector, insurance and brokers and the likes. We also have a second application called Greenfeet, for those of you who are interested in carbon accounting. It's a complete carbon accounting solution. So, one final thing, yeah, we've won a number of awards over the last few years, and just recently, I'm happy to announce that we won another award, the Best Solution for Operation Resilience at the RegTech Insights Awards. So, well done us. Now, that's the end of the sales pitch. Now I'm just going to talk about AI and AI governance. One of my favorite quotes ever is from Thomas Edison, when he hired a Russian chemist in his lab, and the Russian asked him, "What are the rules in the lab here?" And he replied, "Hell, there are no rules here. We're trying to accomplish something." Now, I appreciate that some people perceive governance and rules as stymieing innovation. You got to find a balance, because without governance, you have chaos. Yes, you might have great innovation, but not every organization wants innovation. Okay, in that sense. So let's have a look at what we're going to talk about today. We have a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to cover it in the next 35 minutes and leave 5 or 10 minutes for questions. I could say that if you have any questions, you can ask AI, but I will try to also answer them as a human. The title is AI governance, but I think in any governance discipline that you're trying to govern, a certain amount of literacy is required. If you're not familiar with the subject, at least in broad terms, how can you really say or judge that the governance is appropriate? So today is a bit of a training session. Now, we always have our short webinars, but people like the short webinars. So a lot of it might be just direction for you to go and read a bit more, but I'm hoping to give you enough that you can feel, actually, this is achievable and this is understandable, and it's not black magic. It's fast. That's what it is. So we look at the origins of AI. Where did this all start? What is it being used for, and what could it be used for? Then we look at some of the key concepts. I've 9 I've picked out of, we could have had 15, but I've picked 9 core concepts that I'll talk about. Going to look at the EU AI Act very briefly. This isn't a webinar about the EU AI Act, but it is itself a framework, a governance framework. We'll talk about that later. And then I'm talking about taming the monster. And that's my choice of words. It is a monster. It is big. It is like the Industrial Revolution. It really is. This is changing lives. And just like the Industrial Revolution, there's no point in fighting it. Embrace it, We look at the benefits, and there are lots of benefits, but you've got to manage the risks. So a lot to cover. Who would have thought that AI goes back 70 years? And I like to think it starts with Alan Turing, who came up with the Turing test, which said that if a human judge, let's say, cannot reliably distinguish between a machine and a human in a text-based conversation, then the machine was deemed to have passed the test. Now, for years, for many years, all machines failed. I would argue that they probably fail today. I would argue that they're probably too clever and that can't be a human. But that was the Turing test, that concept. And that was in 1950. And for those of you who don't know Alan Turing, Bletchley Park and Enigma and code breaking, check him out. Fascinating guy. Another mathematician, a guy called John McCarthy, pulled together about 10 scientists back in 1956 for a workshop. Now, this was a 2-month workshop, a research project. And the idea was to see how machines could simulate human intelligence. Yeah, back in 1956, before many of us were born, including me. And because they didn't want it confused with cybernetics, which was kind of the buzzword at the time, they called it artificial intelligence, and that's how long that phrase has been in use. In the 60s and 70s, when computers, the first computers we saw, I suppose, were the mainframe computers in the corner, but computers were rule-based systems that coded logic built into them. And it wasn't until the 80s and the 90s that the concept of machine learning, and I'll talk about this later, but where computers learned from patterns. And I remember one case close to home, De Beers and Shannon making diamonds, and they realized by monitoring the process that if you waited 24 hours to see did you get good diamonds out of the mold, often they weren't, but they learned from the process that you could tell after a couple of hours if this was going to end well or end badly, and were able to save the 22 hours and discard it early. So the machines were learning and adapting, and people were learning from it. It might be the best example, but continue on then to I suppose neural networks was the next thing, or big data. Most people would have heard of big data, talk about big data and neural networks. Now, even though neural network sounds like it's brains and synapses and things like that, no, it took its inspiration, if you like, from the way the brain works. And the concept here was multi-layers, and neural was another word for node, and multi-layers with nodes joining them, and different aspects, different perspectives on a topic. Yeah, getting complex it was back then already. And the problem was that the technology wasn't at the state to be able to support the concepts and the ideas that the mathematicians had. But something happened in, I would say, I remember building a computer in about 2008 with my son, who was 13 at the time, and it was for gaming. And the most expensive part of that computer was the GPU, the graphics processing unit, the graphics card with the GPU on it. It was nearly a quarter of the price of the computer. And around the same time, I'd heard that people mining Bitcoin and scientists were using GPUs, not CPUs. The CPU is the processor that you have in your computer, for the brains of the computer, but the GPU was for graphics, for rendering good graphics in games. If you think of the games today, and they look almost real, the images that they can render, the 3D images, and indeed back then, 3D CAD, computer-aided design, you saw the beginnings of rendering in 3D models that could turn. This was important technology for AI, because the graphic processor units support a matrix multiplication. Now, I know you're not all mathematicians there, but basically the architecture suited the kind of architecture that AI was being built on. So the AI people jumped on those. And I wish I'd bought NVIDIA shares back then, because this was the beginning of that revolution. And they got faster and faster, and the throughput was just incredible. And that's kind of what supported and now is providing the architecture to deliver AI. I'm not sure how many years ago, probably before 2023, but we saw generative AI. And I'll talk about LLMs, large language models, in a moment, but where now you got a chatbot or a GPT chat, and you could ask it a question and it give you a fairly well-reasoned answer. And more recent talk is about agentic AI. That's agents, AI agents, multiple agents in a system with a conductor that is, and here's the scary bit, making decisions, doing some work, analyzing, reasoning, and then saying in, out. And that's the bit that I think authorities are a bit scared of, that AI is without the human in the loop. That's the scary bit. More about that in a moment. Anyway, that's kind of the history. And I take all responsibility for any inaccuracies on the dates, but you get the idea. Okay. For those of you who look, you probably have some examples yourself, but just to give you an idea, I see it as two parts. One is a productivity tool that, and we hear talk about this code generation, and a lot of software engineers now being made redundant because organizations can actually survive with fewer electronic or not electronic, but computer engineers and software engineers because they can use things like Claude. I mean, it really is awesome in the true sense of the word, the code generation capability of it. And problem solving. I mean, I use it all the time. I use ChatGPT. If I'm designing a report and I don't know the function, I don't know how to do it, I say, tell me how to do this and give me a bit of code if I need it. Documentation, it's great for summaries. If you have a large document, you could ask ChatGPT or Claude, give me a summary of this document, or even to generate the document, or even to generate this presentation. You know, I didn't use AI to generate this presentation, by the way. I don't think it's that clever. Joke. Workflow. When this is kind of agentic AI in particular, that I was at a presentation last year where an investor said they have a agentic AI and they've something like 56 different agents where they process requests for funding, because they are investors, investment, and that 56 bots when it goes through all the processes. That's some workflow and some use of AI. We see it, in processing leads or routing support tickets. Research. I think this is huge. Analyzing large data sets because we have limited ability as humans to read hundreds of documents. If you can read fast, that's great. I was never a fast reader because I read the detail. But now with AI, you can get summaries of very large data sets. You can even generate images that may be of a complex system, like AI, and say, give me an image that will explain the different elements of it later. In business, customer service. I mean, I was responsible for customer service for years. Imagine a tool whereby the agent could repeat what even, I can even imagine the customer speaking it, but let's say typing it in and getting the answer to the customer's question. Or indeed, we have seen lots of chatbots in the rise that you go onto a website and you don't talk to a human, you just talk to this chatbot. These are productivity tools, but on the product side, and we're doing it as well, put it into our product. But I think healthcare, there's a lot of huge benefit in healthcare, aiding analysis, I would say, detecting diseases, because it's learned. Think of it as a consultant who's seen this hundreds of times and can recognize the signs. Now I'll talk about, I'm not talking about automation here. I'm talking about this as a tool in the hands of a medical profession is what I would be advocating. But transportation, self-driving vehicles, who would have thought that, 20 years ago? Cybersecurity, and this is the other scary one because it's given the attackers incredible tools to build automated attacks, but it's also given us, the defenders, the tools to be better at defending. Many of you will have maybe a Fitbit on your arm, on your wrist. There's lots of AI in that, and it knows you and knows the patterns. And finance, just picking fraud detection tools, credit scoring, things that recognize, again, patterns, the patterns of the bad guys. So lots, and this is just a selection, lots of uses. Okay. Onto the learning bit now for you. I've got nine concepts I'm going to quickly go through. And the first one, the obvious one, is artificial intelligence. The headline will state that this is replacing humans, because it's artificial intelligence. Well, I would say, yeah, it will. It'll replace humans. It'll replace tasks that humans are doing that are maybe mundane, repetitive, and maybe a bit more than that, but maybe it's tasks that a machine can learn, an AI tool can learn and learn to handle quickly and efficiently and consistently. Because it understands language, it can reason. And I say reason, and this isn't just me, but I asked ChatGPT the other day, how do you say good evening in Milan? I didn't say Italy or Italian. I just said in Milan. And it reasoned that because I said Milan, that I must be talking about Italy and therefore Italian. And it responded fairly instantly with Buonasera. Um, so that's a very simple example, but imagine a more complex document that it can read and understand at some level and make a reasoned comment on it. And it's constantly learning. You hear this very often about LLMs and what are they trained on? They've been trained on thousands and thousands of documents. Now, different LLMs will be trained on different materials. So if you wanted an LLM in the legal profession, there are ones that have been trained on lots of legal documents and will have that legal perception. It's just like humans. When we've all gone different walks of life and have different experiences and exposed to different things. Think of LLMs a bit like that. It's different exposure to different documents and information. So most of them are constantly learning, and more about that later. And it can make a decision. And this is the scary thing. It can make a decision if you let it and take action. And that's if you decide not to have the human in the loop. So for certain things, you certainly want the human to stay in the loop. But for certain things, you can let AI make the decision because it's fairly safe, and the downside is maybe minor. So general purpose AI, what it's about, machine learning, and this goes back many years. I think back into even the 70s, was learning from data. And the modern version of this is spam filters. We take them for granted now, but there was times when we used to get lots of spam every day. I don't even see it anymore because it's filtered out by Mimecast long before it gets to me. But the systems have learned to recognize emails that are spam, and it's making a decision, and the decision is not to pass it into my inbox. Netflix, you'll see this. If you watch 10 movies on Netflix, don't be surprised if it says, prompts you for the next one, we think you like this. Why does it think you like this? Because it knows what you watch. It knows the type of stuff you like, especially if you told it, I liked that. Predictive maintenance. I think we've seen this back in the even back in the 70s. I remember visiting Schindler and they make lifts. Schindler's Lifts, I always thought funny. And they said the lifts make a call to the head office when it needs maintenance. It could actually detect itself. And it wasn't a time-based thing. It was when certain conditions were present that it actually made a decision and placed a call to the headquarters. Fraud detection. Yeah, that's a lot of AI use in fraud detection. With machine learning, it's been there for years that you recognize the patterns again. It's about pattern recognition. Neural networks. We mentioned this earlier. Think of machine learning moving to the next level, and neural multiple layers of information, not just one, not just sequential, but lots of layers. And by lots, I don't mean in tens. It could be hundreds. And the idea is that it could recognize an image. And I'm making this up, but I would understand this would be a good example. If I showed AI a picture of 50 dogs and then 50 cats, and I said, that's 50 dogs and there are 50 cats. The next photograph, the 101st photograph I show it, it could tell me if it's a cat or a dog, because it would have enough information from the other 50 to make that decision. So learning from the image, and what I'm saying, it's not a two-dimensional image either. Probably lots of images from different sides of the cats and dogs, but yeah, this is where it began to get powerful, and people recognize the potential. We all have predictive text these days in our phone, and it predicts the next word. But think of AI as being able to predict the next paragraph, or maybe even the next chapter. That's how powerful it is. I remember the days when optical character recognition, OCR, was very much in its infancy. Nowadays, that's fairly accurate, I would say. So the next step up on the neural networks, if that was layers, was deep learning. That was even more. That was large neural networks. So everything just kept getting bigger, more data, more complex, layers, complex patterns. If you think of speech and the early tools to recognize speech, I can remember trying to dial a telephone number and the system couldn't understand my pronunciation of four. And and F is always a difficult one for speech recognition. I think those days are past. With AI, it can understand different accents, different dialects. It can understand if there's noise in the background, it can suppress that noise. They're much more sophisticated. Why? Because AI and the processing power is there. Modern chatbots, again, it's going beyond the very simple and reasoning and taking all of the information. And this is one of the key things, that is not looking just at the last words that you've written, as in your predictive text. It's looking at the whole sentence. It's looking at maybe the discussion so far. So getting more and more complex is what we saw. And then on to transformers. Transformers, when I was trying to get a summary of this myself, it said it was the engine of the LLMs, which we're coming on to, and decides what's important. It looks at the whole block of text. I'll give you an example. If I said, I have a problem with the mole, you don't know yet what I'm talking about, because is it a spy? Is it something on my face? Or is it an animal in my garden? But if I say, I have a problem with the mole in my garden, then the transformer will immediately see this as, this is a horticultural subject, and it's in a particular dimension, or what do they call it? Dimension, but they talk about hundreds of dimensions. And looks at the whole text and evaluates it. And I saw one graphic of this that looked like a DNA picture, with lots of vertical lines. And think of it like that. It's looking at the whole sentence that you've written and all of the words, and it's weighting the words. It knows grammar. It knows what the verb is, what the object is, what the subject is. That's only one layer of maybe 100 layers. And it now creates a map, and it's a numerical map with weightings that will divert the large language model to give me a response that is horticultural and talks about this animal and talks about how to address problems with this animal, because it has seen that somewhere. Now, we'll talk about hallucinations maybe later, but one of the problems is, if it hasn't seen it before, does it make it up? And yes, it does. Make it up sometimes, and you have to know the difference. And maybe you ask it, how do you know this, or what's the reference for this, or did you just make it up? I've done that, and it has sometimes said, yeah, it made it up. But yeah, the transformers is what is transforming, if you like, the words into vectors, into something that then can direct the large language model to producing the output. It's trained on huge amounts of data. And based on what the transformer tells it, it's predicting the next sentence. And indeed, it can do lots of things like translate. I mean, this is it really is incredible, the accuracy in translation. Languages is a hobby of mine, and I've been impressed with the accuracy of the translations. It can summarize large documents. This is what we've seen, probably great use for it, that if you have to read a lot of stuff, you can get good summaries. One of the earliest and most powerful outputs from it was writing code, a large language model like Claude, Opus, worth paying the money for if you're a developer, because it'll save you hours, days. It'll save you days in producing code. Some LLMs, some of you might be familiar with, so that you know what is you know now what an LLM is when you hear the name. Most of us will know ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and within Claude you've Opus and a few other variations. Google's Gemini, DeepSeek from China, and Meta's Llama. Indeed, we use Llama and open source AI in some solutions we're offering. Okay, let's look at Retrieval-Augmented Generation. I've said learning. That's my error. It's Retrieval-Augmented Generation. And if the LLM is using its own learnings, think of it as adding a knowledge base to that. And we've actually done this in a tool we're about to release, where we had over 15 years built up a knowledge base of 50,000 questions we asked about 2,500, 3,000 risks. And now we can use AI to query that database to say, what can I do to mitigate the risk of fire in the building? And it'll come back with 10 suggestions of things you might and should and could do. That's RAG. When it's using a knowledge base, and it is a safe way of maybe ensuring that the answers a system delivers you are under your control, because it's using a knowledge base that that you've full control of. Whereas if it's just based on the Wide West and whatever somebody else put in, that's one of the downsides. It's only as good as the information it has been trained on. Fine tuning. You will hear people talking about training and fine tuning. Slightly different things, but close enough that the model has to be exposed, if you like, to lots of documents, lots of information, so that it knows when it's asked the question where it should give the answer. In our own model, we wanted to we just released AI dashboards where people can ask the system to create a graphic that will show the number of tasks sorted by priority, and that you can write the question like that. But we had to teach it maybe some language that people might use when wanting to draw graphics and in relation to the data sets. But that's just fine tuning it and making sure it is not misunderstanding the request. And agents. Finally, agents. I said this is the current trend that you will have in any system, multiple agents, and they're I think an orchestrator or conductor, I like to think of it, is conducting all of the agents. And one agent is completing a task and passing it to the next one. So I wrote down here, they talk and they act. They not only can interpret and reason and understand what's happening, they can actually make a decision and pass it to the next one. And when you have 56 agents working in concert, and they do talk about orchestras and conductors, you get one powerful system. And the thing about these is they remember what they did yesterday. This is the memory part of it. This is the scary bit, and I'm not going to talk even about frontier AI systems, but the frontier AI systems where they're afraid to release them because the powers would unleash into maybe the wrong hands. But agentic AI is incredible. Okay, now maybe a bit of the boring stuff first, but I'm going to 3 slides on the EU Act. Well, it's just summarized in one sentence. It's a risk-based governance and compliance framework for AI systems. So you might say to me, well, why wouldn't I just use this framework as my AI governance framework? Yeah, you can. If you're a large organization and you're dealing with sensitive information, you probably should look at this as a framework. But I think, and we'll say that this is designed for, or you can quickly rule yourself out as needing to comply with it, I think, if your risks are low. We'll see. So you'll identify your risks, you'll implement proportional controls. Doesn't this sound like risk management? Maintain documentation and oversight, monitor the systems continuously, and be able to demonstrate compliance through evidence. All sounds like motherhood and apple pie in any governance system. If we look at the risks, because this will give you an indication of what this is about. There are certain risks that they would say are unacceptable and are prohibited. Social scoring systems. And by that, scoring systems based on religion, race, ethnic origins, skin color, whatever. These are prohibited. And if you're using AI systems that are being trained on data, this is where it gets kind of where you should have concerns. Are there biases built into that data? If the data was only collected, let's say, in a country that is 90% white, depending on the culture, it might be reflected in the AI model rather than a multicultural society. Manipulative AI, real-time biometric surveillance in public. There's certain things that maybe are encroaching on personal privacy that are just prohibited. Then there's high-risk AI systems like healthcare, diagnostics, critical infrastructure. employment decisions, yeah, you can use it, but there are strict requirements. And I think they'd be like keeping the human in the loop so that they're not automated. Chatbots, content generation, literacy, transparency, there's some lighter obligations on these. And if it's just spam filters or automation tools, these are unregulated. So I think you quickly find that you've little or no maybe need to comply with it because you're not in scope, but useful as a reference point for any AI governance model. I'm going to give you a reference model as well, one I made up, but generic. Last one on the EU Act is transparency, explainability. I'm looking at the time and I've got to move fast. Yeah, people must be informed, have documentation, keep the human in the loop. If you're talking about high-risk systems, they have to conform. Transparency, providers, if you're Meta or if you're Google, then you have to disclose certain technical detail. Okay, the next 3 slides and 9 points. I want to cover the governance framework that you might consider. Now, if you put this into ChatGPT and ask it for a framework with 9 or 10 points, it'll give you 9 or 10. This is one that I've looked at several different ones, and I've picked this as my starting point, I would say. Start with strategy and purpose. Why are you doing this in the first place? And what's your policy going to be? This has to be, at the highest level. I mean, why would you use AI? And actually, you might even start by establishing, as we did with a survey, and we asked people if they're using it and when they're using it and where they're using it and what they're using it for, because it is happening in your organization. So find out what the current status is and then decide, well, what's an acceptable use, what's not acceptable, and what systems will you allow people to use? That's kind of the basic stuff. Risk assessment. I think you need to analyze the risks. I mean, if people are putting sensitive information into ChatGPT, one, they shouldn't be doing that. Or if they are, then you should have an LLM where you have the maximum privacy. If you're paying for it, basically, if you're using the free stuff, then sensitive information, no. If you're using the paid for stuff, you can have the settings such that it's not learning from your data and it's not restoring the data, but you need to be aware of that. So assess the risks and then implement the controls appropriately. Oversight. Somebody should, I think, at all times, the human should remain in control. And I think there should be a senior individual in the organization who's accountable, somebody at board level and senior management team level who's accountable for this to make sure that it's not just done once and forgotten. You need to keep an oversight because the models change, the uses change, and, before you know it, the frog is boiled. Okay. Data governance. We've got a lot of this from GDPR. But it's not just the personal data now. You're talking about maybe company sensitive information that you want to protect, that you don't want the company secrets to be put out into the marketplace, into a tool. So you need to protect your own data and maybe your customers' data and make sure that that is protected. But if you're making decisions on the AI, you need to have a high level of confidence that the data that the AI is being trained on is good enough for your decisions. Now, I think you probably have to do it by trial and error, understand it, find out, but then do some tests. If you have customers and you're using AI and you're delivering a service with AI or delivering recommendations, they need to be aware of this. We added into our product, we added in an FAQ, AI FAQ, frequently asked questions, try to anticipate the questions customers might have. You have to be transparent. You need to know what the model does, and you need to be able to tell other people exactly what is happening. Data privacy and security. Now, there's a concept of data poisoning. You don't want somebody else to get into your AI system and poison it and cause you to make bad decisions. You don't want people to get into your system and then find out secret stuff that you didn't realize was in the system, like credentials. So think of it as a system that needs protection. If it's your own solution, that it is protected from, yeah, poisoning and from maybe stealing of information. And then the last slide on this one, monitoring and reporting. The board should, if we're talking about governance, the board should know if there have been any incidents. I see there's a question come in. I'll come to that maybe at the end. We'll leave some time, yeah. Ongoing behavior. Is it working? Is it still working 3 months, 6 months after you've implemented it the way you expected? Are people complying with the policies? Can you demonstrate to the board evidence of human oversight that it still is under control of the human? You will need some documentation on this. I've just put in a prompt here on policies, who's accountable, who's responsible, decisions, inventory, decisions you've made on this, because this will be important if you are asked to explain, whether it's by your stakeholder, shareholders, regulator, or even customers. The risks, the controls you've in place, incidents, and learn from your incidents. They might be small, hopefully they're all small, but each of them will tell you something that might be not exactly perfect. And finally, training. And this is often, I think, overlooked in any governance, but how can you expect people to be accountable and responsible unless they have the training, unless they have the skills? So it's not the same training for everybody, but certainly the training should be appropriate to the role and responsibility. And again, it's not a once-off. I think it's like most disciplines, there's probably refresher training needed. I know this is intense and compressed, but hopefully it's given you some feeling for this. 2 minutes more and we'll take some questions. The benefits, there are lots of benefits, folks. Embrace this. It's not going away, so embrace it. Increase the productivity, faster decision making, because you can get AI maybe to summarize all that information you're being bombarded with. A good thing is, by the way, to question the answers you get from a chat GPT if you think it's not right. It's a good approach. I think it can lead to better customer experiences because whether it's a chatbot or whether it's a human using the tool, and whether it's in a company or in an environment like medicine, I always say a radiologist using AI will replace a radiologist not using AI. It's just a tool. It's an amplifier. It's an augmenter. It's something to help you do what you're doing and do better, faster, more accurate. I would hope. I think we're certainly seeing the response now. We're adding AI into our own product and seeing how that innovation, if you like, and that gives us a little bit of competitive advantage. And think if AI can summarize large databases of knowledge, just that knowledge accessibility, where you don't have time to read all of the detail, but you want to get maybe even a sense of, should I bother reading the detail on this, getting summaries. So risks, hallucinations, that's a key word in AI these days. Did it make it up? Is it inaccurate? You can't you can't trust the output 100% is the thing you've got to remember. It's not right all of the time, but you can ask it if it's where to get its answer. A good AI will tell you the basis, and they have little paper clips showing you the source maybe of the information. Data privacy and security, yeah, whether it will unintentionally reveal secrets. Bias and ethical issues, big thing if you're using it to scan CVs, for example. That's a scary one, because you could be accused of bias and you don't even realize it's got bias. Regulatory compliance, make sure you're compliant if you're especially in one of those areas, and know that the cyber attacks will be more sophisticated. So you got to get more sophisticated in your defenses. So the big question, I know you all wanted to know, did I use AI to generate any of this presentation? I did ask it one question. I said, if I was to produce one slide, I said, can you draw me a graphic showing the relationship between the key elements of AI? It took about a minute or two. It thought about it and it produced this. I know that's not readable, so I'll give you the readable version. And I think that's brilliant. It really is. Um, it really did group it well together. And if you just kept one page from this whole presentation, it would be this one, because it's summarized everything and created that image. It didn't find that image somewhere. It created it because I asked it to create this image. Um, but yeah, awesome. So I knew we would nearly run out of time on this. I knew there was a lot of material. I hope it has spurred you into saying, okay, I can deal with this. I can learn a bit more. And it's not a black art. What's black art about it is just the speed. Now I know I have a number of questions in there, so I'm going to have a look at those. I'm going to stop talking and just look at the questions. Okay. Let me see if I can go into that. Okay. If you have questions, put them into the Q&A. So let me have a look. Mick, can you make the slide presentation available after the webinar, please? Absolutely. A copy of the presentation and a recording of the presentation will be available. It's on our YouTube channel, all our previous presentations as well, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Mick again, will calQrisk generate a set of knowledge-based risks as they do for other risk areas? Interesting one, Mick. Mick obviously knows we have this knowledge base. I alluded to it earlier. And we have lots of risks in there by different domains. I mean, Mick, you wouldn't realize we have risks there on fueling aircraft, defueling aircraft, towing aircraft, and anything around aviation. So it's not, I think Mick is in the financial services space. And yeah, we have different disciplines. And will we add more? I think absolutely, because we realize now that our knowledge base is getting a second lease of life. For those of you who don't know it, we used to present people with risks in 25 questions that they could answer. And a lot of customers use that, but other customers came to us with their risks already, with their controls already in place, and they just put them in, or we put them in for them. But this now you can say, what else can I do to mitigate this risk when you're on the risk? And it'll go to our knowledge base and come back and say, well, actually, have you considered this and this and this? Sinead said, thanks. Thank you. Good introduction. Do you maintain a library of prompts? Frank, now, I'm assuming the question is about our own library of prompts. We just released AI dashboards, and in testing it over the last 2 months, I've written a lot of prompts, and I produced a document with 17 with different graphics for people. So yeah, we have good examples. And by the way, for AI, for anybody, if yeah, we still have quite a lot listening, I think the clue is in the prompt. The more information you can put in a prompt into AI, if I'm trying to solve a problem in creating a custom report, I would say to ChatGPT, for example, I'm designing a report using RDLC, that's the programming language, and I will describe the scenario and then ask the question. Yeah, you can do that, or you can say, here's my problem. Before you give me the answer, ask me questions. You can do that as well. But the more you put in the prompt, it's called prompt engineering. Google that one, prompt engineering. It's a good skill to learn. So yeah, Frank, we do that. Anonymous. Should sensitive documents be uploaded to paid enterprise versions of Chat, Cloud, Copilot? Good question. I would say only if the security settings are such that it is not used to train, and it's not stored. Paid for doesn't automatically confer privacy. Certainly, if it's OpenAI, we're using OpenAI version 4, and it's inbuilt, so that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't go outside. But if you're using a paid for tool, check your privacy settings, because it's not automatic. That I know. Okay. All right. We said we'd finish after 45 minutes. I think we've done fairly well, and I can see there's still a lot of people on board. So I'll tell you what, I don't have to go. If you have another question, because I know I spoke for a long time, but I certainly hope it gave you a good introduction. Now, what we're probably going to do is, post-summer at this stage, do 4 deep dives. We did this with Dora last year, and it was quite successful and quite well subscribe to. So write to us, write to me, and if there are subject areas within AI, and maybe it's agentic AI, for example, or maybe it's just something devoted to LLMs and the different LLMs and whatever. I don't know, whatever the topic might be, but we're looking to do deep dives and maybe do 4 of these just focused on different areas. Today's was really high level and really just to give you an introduction, and I hope it did that. I hope we achieved that objective. Okay, there's no more question. Hold on, there might be one. Sorry, there is. Baruch. Are the main 4 to 5 models, Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, DeepSeek, safe to use? Enterprise version, paid and SLN in place. From a regulatory perspective, i.e., where do you find out where your data is stored and if data is used for machine learning? Are they safe to use? Um, you've got to, like I said in the answer to the other question, just because you're paying for something, it doesn't mean that the settings that it is private. Um, um, Not safe to use if you're from a regulatory perspective. It really depends on your governance. I mean, you can use them, but if you're using them for doing social scoring, then definitely you wouldn't use. But if it's a safe to use for stuff that is allowed, um, but it's sensitive information, you need to convince yourself, confirm for yourself that the settings are such on it that it's not going anywhere else. They can be made safe, shall we say that? They can be made safe, I would answer. Um, where do you find out where your data is stored and if data is used for machine learning? You can actually ask AI this. Yeah, honestly, you can probably get a fairly good answer on this, but there is settings on your own chat GPT, down bottom left-hand corner, you can go in and do privacy settings. But generally, if something is free, it's free because what you're giving it is you're training it. When you're paying for it, then you have to turn off that training. And if you're using OpenAI and it's embedded, then it's not going anywhere. That's what we chose to do. So we keep it within the 4 walls, if you like, of the software. Okay, guys and gals, thank you for your attendance. Hope you got something from it. Let me know other areas within AI that you'd like us to dive a bit deeper. This is not going away. So embrace it and govern it well. Thank you. Bye bye.